We are live. Welcome to the No Show. My name is Andrea Edwards.
And I'm Tim Wade. Welcome to the show. Joe Augustin will be joining us a little bit later. And who's our guest today, Andrea?
Our guest today is the lovely Wayne Chan, who is someone that we all know, and he's a wonderful guy. And I'm super excited that he agreed to be with us today. Hello, Wayne.
Hello. Hi, Tim. Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for having me. How are you guys doing over there?
Yeah, no, good. I have to give you a heads up. So Sinovac was the big push in Thailand, and then of course when Delta broke out, they realised that it's not really going to do much good. So yesterday I got my first shot of Astra, and I'm a bit woozy.
Zonked?
So yeah, I'm feeling it. I'm definitely feeling it. But
so if you just start dribbling halfway through the show, we'll know.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
You'll know. We'll take over.
There's a few reasons I wanted to invite Wayne, and one is because I really respect how much you participate in acquiring knowledge, Wayne. So that's something, and I know that you've got this big sort of showy brand, and you're an MC, and you do all sorts of really, really cool stuff. But you're also somebody that does invest in the knowledge of the day, and I as you know me, I very much admire that. So we're really happy to be here with you today. Do you want to give people a bit of a feel for who's Wayne and what you do?
Okay, sure. I mean, for people who don't know me, my name is Wayne Chan, and I'm a full-time host, MC, aspiring speaker. My background is mainly in news and PR. That's where I started out. I spent about 10 years in the newsroom as well as behind the scenes in PR agencies, in corporate communications roles. And then after that, I decided to just drop all of that and become a full-time MC. So that's basically me.
Cool. So it's been a bit of a hard time these last 18, 19 months then, right?
Yeah, the last 18 months have been just a big tailspin of, I would use the word unpredictability. It's something that, I think we can deal with like 3 months, half year, 1 year, but I think in 18 months, a lot of people start to crack, like 18 months of unpredictability. I don't know what's next. And I think just recently, I'm not sure it happened today or a couple of days ago, but there's this clip from this infectious disease specialist. If I'm not wrong, I hope I'm not getting his name wrong. His name is Dr. Leong Ho Nam, and he's often very popular in the media. They often quote him. They invite him to radio shows to talk about his perspective on COVID. And previously they had the H1N1 and all of that, right? The swine flu. He used to talk a lot about all of that. But what he said recently, they tried to get him to make a prediction about what's going to happen next. And I can't remember what his prediction was, but he said one thing. He said, I've gotten my previous predictions wrong, and I'm probably going to get this one wrong too. And I thought that really summed up this whole pandemic, this whole COVID situation with Delta and all the variants, is that no one is ever going to be able to guess what is coming next or adequately prepared. Maybe if you're half prepared, you might be pretty lucky. But the fact of the matter is there's no way to really predict what's next. And I think even the most agile minded person, probably would not be fully prepared for what's coming up next, because this is going to be a very long period of unpredictability. Yeah.
No question about that. There was, there's some stuff that I'm going to bring up today in the news roundup, and we're going to do it differently today. So we've started off with, the news that really struck a chord, and then we went into COVID news, then we went into the climate crisis, and then we went into anything else. And it was just going on for too long. So what we've agreed to do is just to compress it down. My weekend reads, which are published on every Saturday, you can find so much of this, whatever I'm going to talk about is there, but it's also going to be a lot more. So there's always a lot going on in the world. So I've just picked out the highlights that I'm seeing around the world that I believe matters. And hopefully you guys are going to jump in and add your 2 cents. So do you want to get kicking that off?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. And then later, Wayne will talk more about the mindset thing and the struggle of mindset. And I know Tim's got some really great insights and advice, because that's an area of his expertise. So he's going to share, how do we cope with this time and the length of this time and the uncertainty and complexity of the time. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation. All right. So obviously lots to get through. I have to have notes because there's too much to remember. But the UN, an article headline, UN warns time is rapidly running out to limit global heating to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We've talked about this many, many times before, but 1.5 degrees means a large part of the Earth will become too hot to live, and this will impact the countries that grow our food, so the people won't be able to go out and farm the food, which means we'll probably face famine as well. So while you hear people talking about 2 degrees Celsius, we have to get it under control before we hit 1.5. So in this report from this headline, the World Meteorological Organization, didn't get that right, did I? Warns in a new report that governments are falling far short of the Paris Climate Agreement's goal of limiting global heating to 1.5 degrees. And we heard last year, I think it was Gambia is the only country on track for that. The UN Weather Agency has said only immediate large-scale reduction in greenhouse gas emissions can avert a global catastrophe. And the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has been pretty active this week and has basically said humanity's future is at stake. The reporting is, what he's been saying has been reported as frustrated and at fever pitch. Some good news on the climate side. China's Xi Jinping has promised to halt new coal projects abroad amid the climate crisis. Now, I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to this, but with new coal projects and the Green Belt and Road Initiative in China, they have invested billions of dollars, 160 billion to be precise, in coal-fired plants. They haven't all been built, they've been committed to, and these are in countries like Malaysia, Sri Lanka, they're all around the world. So if you haven't looked at the Green Belt Initiative, or it's called BRI, please understand it. A few years ago, I read a report that this single project will increase global warming by 3 degrees. So stopping investing in the coal plants in these countries is obviously going to be critical, but they also need to reduce coal at home. It remains the primary source of energy in China by a long shot, and China consumed more coal than all other countries combined in 2020, and it accounts for 58% of their energy use. So coal's a big one that we need to get off the table, and obviously China is saying by 2030 that they'll try and get rid of coal, but we all know from what we're seeing around the world that it needs to be sooner than that. COVID-19 has now killed as many Americans as the 1918 flu pandemic, and it's continuing to explode around the US. Alaska is now the latest hotspot. Jump in. Oh, here we go. We have Mr. Augustin.
Just barely.
We're going through the news, Joe. Welcome. We're going through the news. Andrea?
Yep, Afghanistan. So the girls have not been able to go back to school yet. And in good news, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has said preventing women from accessing education is un-Islamic. This is obviously an important partner and neighbour to Afghanistan, so it was really good to hear Imran Khan speak up. So anything jumped out at you guys so far?
I just want to say that when you first told me that in a quick summary before all this happened, I thought that Imran Khan thought that the whole not going to school thing or girls going to school was un-Islamic, and I thought he's changed.
Oh, he's always been pretty cool, pretty liberal, right?
Yeah, which is the case. I thought he'd been super cool and something happened to him, but I'm glad to hear he's still the same guy. Great.
Yeah. He's more than a cricketer. He's a little bit more conservative than he used to be. All right, so let's move on to AUKUS. Have you guys been paying attention to AUKUS in the news this week?
Like killer whales?
AUKUS. The defense.
Oh yeah, I've heard a bit about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we finished the no show last week talking about AUKUS. It was still pretty new back then, but there's been a lot that's happened since. So France got really, really pissed and acted, and the reason France is so angry is because they had a submarine deal with Australia, and Australia's basically cancelled the deal. America only spoke to France, to Macron, a couple of hours before it was announced. And just today I saw that apparently ScoMo tried to call Macron the night before, and he didn't actually speak to him before the announcement went live. So they pulled out of talks, and they also pulled their ambassadors. But now they're talking again and trying to mend their friendship. And apparently the ambassadors will return. But of course, for something like this to happen, that means that the French will need to get something in return that's going to make up for the billions that they're going to lose in the submarine deal. So we have to wonder what that is. China, obviously.
Isn't the answer they're buying trains anyway? And because it's Australia, they don't mind slow trains?
China is seeing it as an act of aggression. So one of those stories is China flies 19 aircraft, including fighters and nuclear-capable bombers, into Taiwan's airspace as tensions build in wake of the AUKUS pact. So this is not a good thing. One of the things about Australia that a lot of my community is saying is Australia still hasn't bought its air capacity for fighting fires, and we're looking at another dramatic fire season coming up in the next few months. But hey, let's spend our money on nuclear submarines that'll be delivered 20 years out. Good one, Australia. Britain can use Australia as a base for its nuclear submarines, which of course the New Zealanders are not going to like very much. There's a lot to read, but AUKUS challenges the validity of Quad, and Quad is a pact between Australia, India, Japan, and the United States. So the Japanese and the Indians are actually looking at forming a new partnership. Many are believing that it's going to put NATO at risk, so it's weakening Western alliances. Asia's not happy to see Australia doing what it's doing and is seeing my beloved home country as a threat to regional peace. And with trust already low in the US, especially in the Asia-Pacific region, this isn't helping. The division, so the people in Asia-Pacific have got a choice. They either support China or they support the US. And this is how it's been, especially in the Trump era. So it's not helping anyone when more division is created. So that's been a pretty interesting story. If you haven't looked into it, I would definitely look into it. We are at a point in the world where these sort of agreements, you kind of understand why we need to be making these military agreements, but we've got much, much, much bigger issues to deal with. So any comments?
Well, I'm just curious about where or who is Australia sneaking up on, because you get a submarine to sneak up on people, right? So who exactly?
It's New Zealand.
Are you trying to surprise? Oh, okay. We're here for the Ashes. Oh, wait, you won already. Okay, good. All right.
Yeah. Well, the Ashes is with England, but
yeah, and Australia wants it back.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have a lot of ashes in Australia if those fires go like they're being predicted.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I don't quite understand the purpose of the announcement. Why wouldn't you keep it quiet? I mean, isn't it military?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, you're canceling the French one, but so it just seems antagonistic. And then China goes, you guys are doing that, so we're going to go and use that as a reason for going into Taiwan, which, seems a bit weird. And then, well, not weird, but just, and then everyone's getting annoyed.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't everybody else aren't they all building warships? Isn't China making a big play for ruling the seas? So it's all chest beating but the criticism with regards to spending all this money on submarines being delivered so far away, I get it, but you still need to make decisions that are going to take time to build.
Yeah, so, but it's out of alignment with the future that we need to work towards, right? And
well, at least it's nuclear, and we can take the nuclear waste and put it on the moon and turn it green.
Yeah, and let's interfere with nature in another part of the world, another part of the universe, and see how it backfires on us, right? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, we already screwed up Mars and moved here, didn't we? Okay, fact check. It's just so out of alignment with where we are in the world and the antagonism, but also, just coming off the back of the Afghanistan war, like there's not a lot of trust in the US, Australia, England combination of going to war. We've got a lot of failures behind us, right? So maybe it's time to wake up and let's have a think about what diplomacy could do instead, because we need a lot of that. The big challenge for Australia, I mean, this has been coming for Australia. I think Australia is just Australia during the Rudd government time was making a lot of friendship with China and he could speak Chinese, which was helpful. And then so Australia looked like it was sort of broadening its alliances with the new superpower,
and still maintaining that sort of delicate. This one goes out and says, "No, we're going back with the old one," and that's partly because of the antagonism between Australia and China over many months now,
which Australia created.
With regards to sort of feeling like they're being bullied and all of that. Yeah, Australia's a bit daft with that one. And then so then Australia's linking up with England and US, who have a very long history of sending Australia into battles that are the hardest ones. Let's send the Australians in and protect our guys. So but I get it. I mean, if Australia's under threat, who's going to come to help?
I know. I'd like to live in a world where we stop preparing for war and start preparing for peace, because what we need is peace, so that we can come together, create global unity, get ready to face the issues that the world is going to be facing, and it's happening now. Like some of the reports I'm reading are fairly mind blowing. But let's look at another neighbour, Canada. So Justin Trudeau won the election. Did you guys see that?
Yep.
That was not expected, but he's got a minority government, and for the last couple of decades, we've had so many minority governments around the world, and minority governments obviously are a problem because they don't achieve anything, because they don't have enough power to achieve anything. So it's a bit frustrating. But from an environment perspective, I mean, we know that Trudeau wants to do the right thing and make the right moves, but he's also signed deals with pipelines and stuff. And so, equality, equity, he believes in all of those sort of things. But apparently also he's the leader that would be very keen to join AUKUS. So I think that means it will be rebranded as caucus, which is a little bit easier to say. I'm sure you can do a combination of the letters and come up with something else. But anyway, yeah, so Trudeau's back in. The giant sequoia trees that we were talking about last week, they were wrapped in plastic for one of the fires that's raging through California. They haven't been able to get to the remotest parts of this forest, but it looks like the sequoia trees have made it through this.
So let me understand something.
Place.
We're saving the environment by wrapping it in plastic.
No, aluminium.
Aluminum, yeah.
Oh, aluminium. I thought you said plastic.
Aluminum. Do Singaporeans say aluminum?
Nah, aluminium. Let's go with aluminium.
What you like, baby. Just say it. Just tell me what you want. We used to call it tin foil in our day.
Yeah.
Foiled again.
There was another article out. Somebody did an amazing post on LinkedIn talking about wrapping the trees, but also these huge reflective sheets on the glaciers just to make sure that the reflection's going back to the sun. So it's, at some point, but that obviously is destroying the ecosystems underneath the fabric. So, you kind of win one area, you lose another area. So the technology solution for the climate crisis is
solar power. Why don't we capture it, harness it, use that?
Yeah.
I mean, the sheet, but the people who are making it the cheapest are China, and now they don't like anyone. So, okay.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to Australia and Melbourne.
We could have solar powered. We could have solar powered submarines. It's just that they have to be at the surface the whole time.
Yeah, that kind of wouldn't work, right? Yeah, so Australia and Melbourne. So my word, what is going on? So the freedom fighters are out on the street, and there's been more than 10 police officers going into hospital with broken bones as they've been crushed under the crowds. So the story is the tradies, and if you're not Australian, that means tradesmen and tradeswomen. So they're plumbers, electricians, builders, construction workers, that type of thing. They're going off over COVID mandates and access to tea rooms. The largest trade union movement in Australia is actually female. It's teachers, nurses, but there's a very, very small percentage of males, and no one really knows if it's the tradies who are involved in the violent protests, or if it's just violent protesters getting in on the mix. The protests headed to Melbourne's War Memorial this week, and if you know Melbourne, this is a very, very sacred place for Australians, so it's not exactly going to win friends and influence people. But one of those protesters who was there at the War Memorial is now in hospital with COVID. There's another story of a Sydney TikToker who's an anti-vaxxer and a freedom fighter. He's now in hospital with COVID, and so is his dad. So I hope his dad is going to be okay. The media is obviously having a field day, creating more and more division, especially against Dan Andrews, the Premier of Victoria. Murdoch doesn't like him very much, but this confusion is really creating problems. When I look at my social media community in Australia on both sides of this argument,
it's very difficult to see what's true, who to believe, who not to believe. And in the mix of all of this lovely violence in Melbourne was a magnitude 6 earthquake just outside of Melbourne. And if you don't know this, it's a very, very unusual thing for Australia to experience a magnitude of this scale in that area. They don't have any tectonic plates. Reading through all of this, we've got such a long way before we can get to the end of this pandemic. There's so many boiling points around the world. People have had enough. They're protesting, but at some point we're going to wake up to the fact that it's only making it worse. We just have to get through it, and we have to do the same thing for the same time everywhere so that we can get through it. But some other escalating violence that I've seen, there's a freedom fighters protest in France, and some other protesters joined it and started beating those protesters with sticks because they're so sick to death of the freedom fighters and the fact that they're elongating COVID. So that was not a very pleasant thing to watch, but that's kind of where we are. Everyone's getting angry with each other.
Yeah, this whole thing about escalating violence in Melbourne, one of the stories that I heard was about how the union members were unhappy with the union the leaders.
Yeah.
And they found, or they said, the leaders anyway, said that the violence had erupted, but they were amongst people that weren't from their union and actually had been, that they just got involved and they weren't part of the union at all. So it's one of those things. Was it a contagion internally, or did people actually make their way across to help to poke fire?
Yeah, basically. There is a story that the union leadership betrayed the union members. So we've got to wait until we get to the bottom of that. The fact that they're not tradies protesting, but then there's some obvious photography of them coming out of a building all together, and they destroyed the building. But it's pretty unpleasant. And for everybody I know in Australia, especially in Victoria, especially in Melbourne, who suffered lockdown longer than anywhere else in Australia, the anger is really, really growing towards this minority, and it is a minority. Like even among the trade union members, I think in this particular area, there's like 300,000 members, and there's 3,000 protesters. So it's a tiny percentage of the whole. So yeah, the rage is certainly growing. It's just crazy, right? What we're seeing. It's just nothing's helping any of us get through to the end of this crisis. So. But I don't think it helps anyone's mindset, right?
No.
Well, one of the challenges that someone I know who is in public health was talking about is the approach that Australia took, or at least Victoria and New South Wales took, was very challenging because it wasn't a consistent set of behavior. It was like we want to be extra careful, but we're gonna have a cricket game in the MCG. We want to be, we're gonna have a lockdown here, but we're gonna have this big parade or these big sporting events were happening at the same time. So what it did was it created this very inconsistent sort of expectation with the audience. And so when you try to lock down an audience that doesn't feel that it had to do it in the first place, because it didn't seem to be the case. That's how it all winds up this way. So you end up with, I mean, it's a powder keg that's gonna go off, right? I mean, COVID is winding you up. You're suffering from other mental, challenges and stuff along the way. It's not been the easiest time. Maybe you're economically challenged as well. And then something like this comes along, and it's a kind of an outlet, really. It's an invitation for some people to go out there and say something, or just I don't think maybe you go out there and say, I'm going to be violent, but you want to go out there and be part of a voice. And then what happens, and what can happen, is just you're caught up in the moment. Something happens, and socially you go like, breaking this thing seems to work, okay, and then it escalates.
Yeah, the mob.
Yeah. That's a real thing, and so hard to. It is very hard to understand, but getting yourself in the middle of a group and being carried by what the group does, people don't understand that before they're actually in it, and then it's been shown that people who've never had an inclination to do a violent thing find themselves in the midst of that, and suddenly they're caught up in it.
Yeah. But overall, it's not really helping any of us get through this, right? It's making it worse, and it's making the desperation and the starvation in the developing world worse. And that is always my focus. We need to end this virus for them, because people need to be able to get back on their feet, earn income, and get their lives back to some degree, because the impact of the economic impact in the developing world will be around for some time to come. So my heart is always with the people suffering the most. And it's the selfishness of the West, as always, that creates that. This is one that you're going to like, Joe. It's called Climate Change ETFs. You can tell me what that means. Found to be undermining war on global warming. So it's an article in the Financial Times. I'll share it in the weekend read. And basically saying climate-focused investment funds are undermining the fight against global warming by routinely engaging in greenwashing. We spoke about greenwashing a few weeks ago. So obviously, if you're an investor, got to keep your eyes open, and really pay attention to the greenwashing that's going on. Do you want to jump in on that one, either of you guys, or Wayne?
Well, okay, let me give a couple of definitions, and then Joe can give his wise opinion. So ETF is an exchange-traded fund. So basically, you can invest on a stock exchange, and you can buy and sell frequently, whereas a mutual fund, you usually have to put money in and then give them sort of notice, and some days later they might give you your money back, or months or whatever it was. So just liquidity is a lot faster. Obviously, what they're suggesting is that these funds have been set up to, well, my guess is to reap the benefits of any green initiative, but some of the organizations that are represented in the fund, in other words, they're buying shares in other companies. The fund buys shares in multiple companies and has a basket of companies with the various weightings depending on the company that they're investing in. And some of those companies are engaged in greenwashing, or the fund and the fund manager themselves are greenwashing. And the danger for the fund manager is that people pull their money out and place it with some other fund manager. So they've got a responsibility to their own investors and their own shareholders and their own brand to do some due diligence on the greenwashing and not perpetuate it. And of course, the organizations who are chugging out the dirt and pretending they're clean, they might have less incentive to change because their model is what their model is. So they're more likely, my guess is, they're more likely to fund, lobby, and try and get in the back door with these sorts of fund managers or organizations. So the fund manager holds a lot of power to change behavior. And if the fund managers can be held accountable, held to account, then, or really place their money elsewhere, because you look at any sort of organization and just look at their structure, you can see, what percentage is owned by fund managers. They've got quite a sizable position, some of them.
You see the investment in green stocks going off the charts, right? And that's been happening and building for a while, and it's seen as a big opportunity for the investment firms. But the amount of media coverage and reporting that's coming out now around how the vast majority of those investments are not actually green. So that's going to create a big crisis of trust in the industry. And obviously there's potential other implications there with people pulling their money out because they don't trust the people who are managing their money. So it's a potential crisis. Joe, have you got anything on that?
Well, I think that the fundamental thing is you got to look at who are organizing these funds, as in who are putting these funds together, these fund managers, right? If they're independent and they've been set up exclusively to try and do something green, fine. But if they're part of a wider swath of investment funds, some of which are in other areas as well, and this is just a different flavor. Then what you're doing is you're looking at a fund that's been put together to serve a market rather than it is to put a cause forward, right? So it's CocaCola looking at the market and going like, people seem to like water, so we'll set up a water thing as well, but we still produce Coca-Cola, right? So I think that's the way you need to have a look at some of this. Just the profit motive has to be there. There's always a belief that we can do something about it, and part of this is actually we're doing a trade with ourselves, right? We're trying to justify the pursuit of money, the making of money, versus the cost of making that money or the ethical cost of that. I think you have a story of crypto that's going to hit me in that way a little bit later on. But yeah, so but that's the thing now. You try, it's basically the justification, right? You're trying to trade your guilt for something else. I don't think all the investing that goes into green is by people who are necessarily driven that way. They just want to be able to shut some kids up at the dinner table.
Yeah, right. I know, Wayne, are you in the investment game?
Not really. I'm not really into the investment game at the moment. Yeah, I'm one of those kind of old school guys who keeps my money like underneath my pillow and stuff like that.
Excellent. Give us your address later.
Yeah, what's your address? I need to send you a free book.
Yeah, I just thought those were shoulder pads. Okay, now I know what they are. Okay.
All right, let's move on. So Boris Johnson has been in the US this week, and Biden played down the chance of a trade deal. So Brexit continues to bite. He also made a speech to the UN where he said, humanity is reaching a turning point on climate change. Duh. But obviously that's all about getting everyone ready for COP26, which he's going to be hosting. The problem with Boris Johnson for me is I just don't believe him when he speaks. He's never struck me as a man of moral fiber. And, many, many times that's played out over the years. Joe Biden's really stepped up on the vaccine equity front this week. I don't know if you guys have been seeing that reporting. He's really trying to step into the global leadership position that we would have expected when COVID first struck back at the beginning of 2020, but Trump didn't. And his line is, we need to go big. And while it's very, very long overdue, you can really see how much damage and credibility the US has lost around the world in the last few years, especially with the Trump years. And there's a lot of anger towards him and as well as towards the US. So Biden's pushing for the vaccine technology and infrastructure to be shared around the world. And basically, let's get the job done. That's the message. But the pharmaceutical industry continue to push back against this. And I just, surely they realize we're at the point where they've just got to say, we have to do this. Nobody trusts them anyway. If they want to maybe get a little bit of an uptick in trust, do what's right. There's an article with the headline, who gives date for the end of the COVID pandemic? So, Wayne, you'll be interested in this. But Bill Gates says he has the only solution to end the crisis. Now, it's one of those really divisive headlines, especially if you don't like Bill Gates. But actually, the point that he's making is the only way we can really do this is to have factories that can produce enough doses for everyone within 100 days around the world. And he says this is something that's very, very feasible. So let's hope that happens, huh?
WHO said 100 days.
No, Bill Gates.
Oh, Bill Gates.
Yeah. Basically, do it quickly within 100 days, get enough doses everywhere around the world. We've got the infrastructure. We just need to get the tech into it. Go, 100 days, vaccines out. Maybe we won't be facing that next mutation that everyone's terrified of right now. So
I'm glad he said that because it takes away the, could be 18 to 24 months sort of wild statements that we're throwing around. And if it's really possible to do it in 100 days and we get it done in 180, that's acceptable.
Yeah. But everywhere, right?
So we've got a KPI now, I guess.
Yeah. Until it's over everywhere, it's not over anywhere. And, I posted that right from the beginning. And there's this mindset in the world that just doesn't seem to see that. Like if it keeps going in Africa where it's, wreaking havoc, well, it's going to mutate at some point and then come back. And it's like, we've just got to nail this, and if vaccination is the way to do it, we have to get ahead of the virus. We have to outsmart the virus. And if that's the way that we do it, we have to agree, okay, that's the way we're going to do it. Let's do it. And all this opposition to it, it's like, well, do you want to just keep going through what we're going through? I don't. I know you guys don't. So what do we, let's get the consensus. Let's get going. I know in the developing world, people are just gagging for the virus, not for the virus, for the vaccine, because they don't have any access to it. Like I only just got a proper one, right? Here we are, like 9
What was the story about Japan giving 20 million? Was it 20 million?
To Thailand.
To Asian countries, I think it was. Was it to Thailand?
Yeah, no, Thailand got some from Japan. They've got a whole bunch of AstraZeneca. They've got a whole bunch of Pfizer. Moderna's coming, but it's very slow. And it's like,
you'll get 2,000 shots of Pfizer in Phuket, and then it's within 2 seconds it's registered and it's gone.
Yeah. So here's the challenge I have with that one is, logistically speaking, why did Japan end up with 20 million extra? Don't know either. Now, Singapore did give 500,000 to Australia, but theirs was a proviso that you got to send it back when yours finally arrives.
Yeah.
So that sounds a little bit more reasonable. Is that we're still trying to get everybody vaccinated, but we're at a particular level where we're just trying to get the laggards now finally in and getting their shots. So in the meantime, we'll send you the 500,000. You send us back the 500,000.
Yeah.
In December when you get your shipment. That, to me, that's like we're trading based on what our numbers are showing and who needs it quickly and stuff. I think that's good politics. Maybe Japan's doing the same thing, but otherwise,
Japan's been completely locked down apart from the Olympics. They've been completely locked down since the beginning of it, so they need to be able to open up. And if you want to open up, you've got to sort out your neighbours.
Japan are great at locking down. They can do it for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do.
We were doing, I'm doing this show with NUS, right? And one of the things that was really surprising was to hear from the Japanese doctors what was happening in Japan, because you do think of Japan as being the leading edge, kind of economy, technology, all that kind of stuff, right? And they're actually, at the edge of their capacity as well. They're actually in a situation where the ICUs are full. And it's for personally, it struck me because I just thought to myself, you think about Japan being all this that modern, that far ahead, and then when you hear a doctor just saying it's terrible, it's actually all full, and you go like, oh wow, so that's the kind of thing that they're facing as well.
When you visit Japan, you see a lot of places that aren't as modern as some places.
And they also have more elderly, right? It's one of those.
They got a big elderly population, which is a tough one to convince, because they've probably, out of the entire population, theirs is the largest segment that has a reasonable reason not to get jabbed. But anyway, I was going to say something else that may not be as taken in great taste, but any elderly population is the one that, if they might be weighing up some real mortality issues with regards to getting it and not getting it. So there's a couple of different
absolutely. Yeah. But the number one thing that predetermines that you're likely to have a bad reaction is your age. So that's something that when the people who do the medical updates, scientific updates, and I do one for longevity as well, right? And they say that is the one thing. It's if you can, it is the greatest determinant. So if you look at that curve, you see where all the deaths occur and all that. It's almost exclusively in the upper range.
Yeah.
Although that's been changing in as it's Delta has definitely changed the game as far as who dies, and a lot more younger children. So it's and another mutation is the great fear. Will it be worse? US is allowing vaccinated travelers into the country from November. So if you want to get on a plane and go to the US, you'll be able to. Another report titled "The Rate of Global Warming During the Next 25 Years Could Be Double What It Was in the Previous 50." So this is a new angle on the climate crisis that I read this week. So a former NASA climate scientist called James Hansen, he spoke to Congress 33 years ago and said that human emissions of greenhouse gases were cooking the planet. He's now warning that he expects the rate of global warming to double in the next 20 years. And the irony of this is because of reduced aerosol pollution, and that is what is leading to the temperature rise. So obviously carbon dioxide and methane are still driving global warming, but it's being accelerated by the decline of other industrial pollutants. So it's kind of like, oh God, how much more can we get wrong? So basically what happens is when the sulfate aerosols have declined, what they're doing is they're making the clouds less reflective. So that lets more solar radiation in, which of course warms the land and the ocean surfaces. So it looks like we've got to clean all of that up. But that's a bit of we can't double in the next 20 years. That's not a good thing. Anyone else read that one?
No, I'm just always struck how every now and then you'll get some usually it's good news from science, but this is one of those things where you're like, damn it, science again.
Yeah. There's not a lot of good news from the climate scientists at the moment. There's a few of them that try to keep our hope alive, but a lot of them, I think a lot of them have basically, they're in despair. They just don't think we're going to wake up in time to have a reduced impact on our future. Another big story this week has been the Haitian migrants in the US. It's a terrible story. They're living under a bridge in Texas. It's 39 degrees Celsius, which is like 99 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's extremely hot. There's no sanitation. There's very, very poor conditions. It's difficult to get food, you name it. Some have been flown back to Haiti, and the Haitian envoy in the US has actually resigned because of the inhumane response to these people. But now thousands are being given the right to stay, so they've been granted refugee status. If you're not following what's going on in Haiti, it's a failed state politically, economically, and in every possible way. So that's been a pretty sad story. Any of you guys have a look? Did you go and notice that one?
I didn't see that one.
No.
It's pretty gruesome. All right, another, which I thought was a wonderful piece of news. It's in a publication called The Baptist News. So this is America's religious leaders speaking to its community. The title is COVID-19 and Moral Incompetence. It's been written by a guy called Wendell Griffin, who's a circuit judge and pastor of the New Millennium Church in Little Rock, Arkansas. Okay, let me give you a couple of quotes from it. The surge of infections, hospitalizations, and deaths surrounding COVID-19 shows that moral incompetence can be deadly. And it reminds me of a warning found in the first chapter of Proverbs about the dangers that befall people termed simple, scoffers, and fools. The article then goes into describing what each of them is, and he takes great pain to say that God will not protect you from COVID. He said, one of his statements is, there is a moral order to life that applies to everyone. So it's a real kick in the pants to people who have been sprouting those sort of beliefs. At the end, the death toll from COVID-19 is surging. Children who cannot be vaccinated are being infected at an alarming rate. Hospitals are crowded. Health workers are worn out. Funeral homes directors are overwhelmed. And he said there are some obvious these are some of the obvious consequences of the pervasive moral incompetence surrounding COVID-19. It's a pretty powerful piece if you have an opportunity to read it. Some would say it's late, but when the religious leadership obviously speak up and speak to their flock and just say, come on guys, this is not the right behavior and this is not what our faith is about, I think that's a good sign. So you need to have a look at that one.
Well, hopefully it's them taking responsibility for their part in it and not saying, it's somebody else who's not doing their job along the way. I wonder how many of them are really prepared to step up to the plate, right? I mean, one of the things that I love best about the commentary, at least on the U.S. situation, is there's so much faith that I will be protected against COVID-19, but I need a gun.
Yeah. The contradictions, right? It's just
No, Andrew, I like that one. I like what you were saying. I think that's a responsible position from a pastor.
Yeah, you'll really enjoy it. And he sort of talks about, none of us like to be told, I told you so. And I think that's under the simple one where, we like to have the right to make our own decisions, but when that's the wrong decision, we don't like to be told that it was the wrong decision, So it's a really, really, really brilliantly positioned article. And I just hope it starts to have an impact because
I think religious leaders in because every religion, I think pretty much every religion, I'm pretty sure it's everyone, has the golden rule, love thy neighbor. And some of them are worded differently, like don't hurt your neighbor. If you're not if you don't hurt yourself, it's sort of bad, but it's the same concept of love thy neighbor as you would thyself. And if that's the case, if thy neighbor, so there's a couple of things there. One of them is, being understanding, but the other one is if the majority of thy neighbors are saying, please get this jab, then love thy neighbor and get it. But then they might say, well, as I love myself, and myself is don't get the jab, and so I'm going to love you by telling you not to. So then, we've got a bit of a conflict for that. So I would love to have a look at that particular article, because I think it's a very responsible position. We saw early in the COVID crisis, pastors going out there saying, we don't want to shut down our church, we want to keep it going. This is very early days in, sort of April last year, and then getting COVID and dying. And we saw churches here who, so the senior pastor at one of the major churches here in Singapore made a big call to stop services even when we didn't have to. And they were praying about it and everything else. And people were getting, had different opinions about it. Not everybody could, but his was, let's, the right thing to do is to go online. They didn't know how to. Well, they kind of knew how to. They had to scramble a bit to do it. And then, like 2 weeks later, government went, we're closing that part down, something like that. I don't know about the timelines, but it was beforehand. And so there was an element of justified by it, but it was a very brave decision.
Yeah.
And the courage of making those sorts of decisions, I think, will define leadership as we come out of this. And now we're a year and a half on from that time, and we're getting a different voice. Don't you feel it's I mean, obviously we've got more knowledge and understanding. It's become sort of part of life a lot more, but we're getting riots in Melbourne.
Yeah.
We're getting people venting. Social media is becoming even more vitriolic. Well, some circles are getting vitriolic, and it's just I think it's a manifestation of people's anxiety, but I also think it's it's being weaponized politically for movements to try and jump into possibly peaceful crowd protests and turn them nasty to either show the incompetence of the current government or to lobby against some decision or something like that. So it's starting. It's always been political to a degree. In the early days, it was about make the prudent conservative decision and protect. And now it seems to be, and I know people are hurting financially, and it's been, and some people and some countries, I mean, Andrea, you see this more than we probably do here, but in some countries it's really devastating to what it's doing to the poor. But it's morphing now. Even so, the virus is morphing, but our attitudes and behaviors and our humanity is morphing.
I think the vast majority of people want to be on the same side, and the vast majority of people are starting to speak up more and then just not putting up with it. And there's a minority that believe in what they're fighting for, and I don't have any problem with that. I have a problem with the violence and policemen having their bones broken and all that sort of stuff. But we have to get to the point where we say, this is what we're going to do as a global society, and we do it. And you're not necessarily going to be happy with what that decision is. I think all of us are on the side of that. We know the decision that we know that needs to be made. But if one of us wasn't, we would respect that. But the reality is we have to get to a point where there's a decision and we move forward. And that's the end of it, or we're going to be here for years.
Yep.
Well, the big challenge that we're facing right now is that we're being Joneses looking at each other, right? So it's the Joneses are looking at the Joneses and they're going like, oh, they seem to be doing pretty okay over there, and they're doing okay over there. And like what's happening in Australia is they see the rest of the world opening up, and they go like, we want that, and we're being held back from that. But they also don't want to embrace the whole idea of, well, that's because they have 80% vaccinations done. That's why they can do that. So, oh no, we don't want that. We don't like that part where you're going to force us to have the vaccinations. We want the freedom, and we want to have the rest of that stuff. But what about the vaccinations? It's okay. We don't want that. We want what the Joneses have, right? So that is what causes that the lack of fully understanding what is happening around them, and there's so little effort really in terms of anyone trying to find out what they don't know. There's probably not that many people in Australia who think very much about why the lockdown is happening. They don't even explore the idea of the math. They don't think about the vaccinations. They don't think about the variants. They don't think about all those things. They just think about what they want, and they can only see what they want in context of what they see on the other side. It's just like, even here in Singapore, I have friends who are looking at what's happening in the US and the UK, and you watch an EPL game and you go like, wow, that's really going really well over there, without looking at the other numbers underlying as well. You have to take both into consideration. You have to say, okay, we're going to go back to sporting events, and we accept the number of deaths that's going to come along with that, even with vaccinations. Because the UK is dealing with that particular kind of math. Australians don't want to deal with that. I don't think. Well, I'm this is a gross generalization, but I think those who are involved in that push against it, they're not doing it with the whole picture in mind.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they quote the death numbers, and you're like, yeah, but kind of, your country doesn't have high death numbers because your governments have taken care of making sure that didn't happen.
Yep.
Whereas the countries that didn't take care of that not happening, I mean, just look at the next neighbor, Indonesia. It's a very horrible situation going on in Indonesia. There's global oxygen shortages, so we don't want multiple countries in this crisis where they can't even provide the basics. When the crisis happened in India, I mean, the majority of people who died did not need to die. The only reason they died is because they didn't have enough hospital beds, they didn't have enough oxygen, they couldn't take care of young people died, Every single person I know in India lost people. People who've probably been in my training courses died, colleagues, that I've worked with. And it's just like, this is what we're dealing with. And, what's happening in your country is one part of the story, but you've got to look at when it's out of control. And of course, in Europe, winter is coming, and America, right? It's coming. And that's when the virus seems to take off. So
I was just thinking at that, while you were saying that, I was wondering, you mentioned some people got COVID that were in the protests in Melbourne. And they're saying that, so it's an anti-vaxxer protest. They get COVID, the guy and his father and somebody else, they're all in hospital. I understand that if you're struck with something like that, the last thing you really want is the media turning up and saying, what do you think now?
Mm.
But I would be really interested to see what that answer is. I would love to know what that answer is, because it's going to be a different answer to when they come out. If they're saved from it by the medical scientists and the medical people who they've kind of been professing against.
Yeah.
Because then they'll come out as this sort of, I went through it and it's fine. See, everything I said was fine.
Yeah.
But when they're in it and scared, and I get the lack of humanity with that suggestion. But if you're an influencer, because what Joe was talking about just now was about how we've got this real pick and choose mentality. We see it in the church. We see people, and we see it in, people pick and choose the parts of the Bible that they like.
Mm.
And those other ones, I'm not going to worry about that part. I'm going to choose this
supermarket.
part.
It's called supermarket religion, right?
I guess. I mean, and
choose what you want.
And it makes it hard for the people who are trying to accept the whole thing, because your branding's kind of damaged. But at the same token, it's the same for lots of different parts of life where we're picking and choosing, keeping up with the Joneses. Is like Joe was saying, I want this, but I don't want the sacrifice. And that's the word that really did pop in. I want the benefit without the sacrifice. And we idolize sports people, but and we acknowledge that there's probably some sacrifice. We idolize pop stars. I want to be a pop star. I want to be a famous actor. I want to be a sports superstar. I want to be loved, really, is what they're saying. But they don't want to put in the sacrifice,
or they don't want to acknowledge the cost that comes with it. I did a speech at APSS about that. If you want to be iconic, okay, that's fine. Are you willing to accept the cost of what being iconic means? And I remember when I did it, the majority of the room put their hand up at the beginning, and by the time I finished, only half the people put their hand up. So they were willing to accept the cost of being iconic, and that's like famous people or sports stars. But there's a cost to all of it.
They lose their freedom.
Yeah, every step you take forward towards what you think you want, you've got to accept the cost that comes with it, and it's not always a good cost.
So this is it, and this is a great discussion for COVID.
Yeah,
is the cost of getting a jab, if you don't believe it works, what if you don't believe it works, but if you get the jab, you'll get the freedom that you want?
Yeah.
Then get the damn jab. Now, if you think it's going to hurt your life, you think it's going to have a detrimental health impact to your life, and that is going to be pervasive for the human population, then that's a reasonable argument if you've got some evidence that suggests that the human population is suffering as a result of the jab. You know what I'm saying?
Wayne, yeah. No, I know. Wayne, do you want to jump in? Because you might have a completely different perspective.
I think all of this that's happened, right, is really... Everything that's happened with COVID has been linked to a couple of things. One, human selfishness. Secondly, foolishness. Thirdly, pride. Fourthly, laziness. Why do I say this? To be very honest, to anyone that's listening, why in the blue blazes would you let a disease like COVID find more human wood to burn through? It just doesn't make any bloody sense, right? All the way from the start. The reason why any of this happened is because we had a bunch of very greedy, incompetent, selfish, and lazy leaders in charge of the world, from all the different big countries as well as the World Health Organization. But at the very beginning, from China to India to US, each and every one allowed mass gatherings to happen even when COVID was spreading, all the way starting from the Chinese Communist Party in Wuhan, because of political reasons, because they have an election coming, because there was a big banquet, they needed to get a political message out, so they just continued letting people gather because they wanted to get some kind of political message out, or something, or gain political points. Same with Trump, same with Modi in India, and same with Xi Jinping in China. The same thing, the same damn thing. It is so strange. But even after that, all of that happened, we just couldn't get our act together because people were lazy, people were selfish, and people did not want to pay the price or the cost with what we're saying of a harsh lockdown, which would be better than long-term pain, which is what we're going through. Because, my friends, we're at a point whereby actually we're at a very, very precarious point, because the next turn that we make is going to be very disastrous or not. And I think there's still time to stop this thing with a very, very harsh lockdown. Yes, we need to vaccinate. Yes, we need to test. Yes, we need to trace. But the fact of the matter is, this thing is not going to stop until you stop it spreading. And also, to friends who are watching, there are a lot of people out there who say that this is going to be like the flu after vaccination. Well, my friends, if it's like the flu, why are we still wearing masks? Because we don't wear masks with the flu, but we're still having to mask up and socially distance even after vaccination. That should tell you this ain't no damn flu that we're playing with. This is no flu. There's no way to treat this like the flu. It is not the flu, and we need to have a better way to deal with it. Vaccination, of course, is something that everybody has to do, no doubt, but I feel that it's still like a temporary measure to buy us some time to do something else. You know what I mean? After vaccination, what do? Right? Vaccination stops the people that we love from dying and being hospitalized and having severe symptoms, but that's for now. We still need to think of how to stop this thing from spreading. That should not end. And I think world leaders are discovering that this whole endemic route actually might be a little bit of a mistake. And that's why you're seeing people like backing up. Oh, wait a minute. I thought after 80% we could open, right? And but how come we're not opening? So there's something going on here, and you realize, oops, it's kind of like every single thing is just going back to what that doctor said. I said earlier, everything that he predicted, was going to go wrong, and he's probably going to make another wrong prediction. He says that because I think that the fact of the matter is, this virus is something that you can't outsmart, and that's the problem with the whole thing, is that everybody keeps thinking, I think there's some way I can outsmart this virus. You know what? Let it spread first. We'll come up with a cure later. That is the problem, that you keep thinking there's something you can do later to stop it, but the fact of the matter is, you just shouldn't have let it spread. And it's really done some damage, but is there some way that we can still stop it now from continuing to spread? Is there a way to have like a mass coordinated worldwide lockdown for just 1 month? Just one month.
Which is what we should have done at the beginning, right?
30 days. But can we still do it? You know what I mean? And if we don't do it, what is going to be the cost of letting it be endemic? I mean, that's my question.
Or we do Bill Gates' plan, right, where we just get those factories chugging out vaccines all over the world, and within 100 days, vaccinate as many as we can. And of course, we know that there are people who can't be vaccinated. So please, that's not what we're saying. We're at an hour, but awesome thoughts, Wayne. Really, I won't go into the details. You can look at these articles in Weekend Reads. But one of the articles that really jumped out at me is, "Are we eating ourselves to extinction?" And this is about the extinction of crops. So we've declined in the amount of crops that we rely on, and so we're basically moving towards homogeneity with our food as well as how we shop. When you go to a mall anywhere in the world, it's the same brands everywhere, right? And it seems so right now in the world, when it comes to seeds, they are controlled by 4 corporations. Things like the world's cheeses, with the bacteria and the enzymes, are manufactured by a single company. And we all know that for human health, you need lots of different bacteria and enzymes in your bodies. The one that the boys were like, the 1 in 4 beers that are drunk around the world is the product of one brewer. So this homogeneity is actually putting humanity at great risk, and we have to come back to that diversification. But that's a really great one. Another one is in The Guardian, and it's one of their long reads. And please, if the long reads jump out at you, spend the time with this information. That can be a 20-25 minute read. This world that only wants to take in short amounts of information, we've got to invest in knowledge again. That's a really big part of getting through the future. Great article on food fraud. Please read it. It's absolutely brilliant. Facebook has decided it's not going to apologize for anything anymore, because every time they do, no one's nice to them. So they've decided on a big campaign of isn't Facebook awesome? So when you're on Facebook and they're pushing their ads at you, which, they reject my ads because I might want to talk about sustainability, but I'm not allowed to advertise that, but they're allowed to advertise, and politicians are allowed to lie. But anyway, I don't think it's really working for them. The fundamental issue is they need to deal with their platform and the problems it's creating in the world. Jeff Bezos has pledged $1 billion to conservation because he was in space and he saw that the Earth looked fragile. So that's one good outcome. And then the final thing is...
Sorry, but what a crock of crap.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for the billion.
Yeah. One headline that I think Joe will be interested in: waste from one Bitcoin transaction is like binning 2 iPhones. And
by the way, Andrea, since you mentioned the Jeff Bezos one, he just made that billion.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Please continue.
Yeah, exactly. We need a little bit more, Jeff.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is one of these stories that look, I'm not one of these people that will ever say that I understand cryptocurrencies. It doesn't make any sense to me. I've talked to people that are experts in it. It still doesn't. It's like my mind can't grasp the idea of what it actually is. So I'm not sitting here as a person that's even professing to know what I'm talking about. What I
just give me 6 hours every week for the next month.
Oh, it's going to take that much time. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. But the environmental emissions from crypto, what is it? It's
mining.
Yeah, and it's out of control, and it's just another story in the mix that we've got this new technology. I mean, sending emails has an emissions, attached to it. So are we going to just keep focusing on making money, or are we going to work out that we need to get it all under control if we got any chance of a livable future? I know Joe, I don't know if you want to add there.
Well, it's one of those situations where I've got to kind of defend where I am, but I'm going to sound exactly like I do, I think, to my wife every time we have some sort of argument, and I come up with a good excuse or a excuse, right? So this calculation about crypto. First of all, it's often been bandied around that it's such a horrible environmental thing, it has to stop. And then someone did the math and said, well, in that case, banking has to stop because it actually is worse than crypto in terms of what it does. It's essentially what crypto or blockchain anyway is sort of able to do if well implemented. It can actually replace the entire banking system, as in you can do things in a trustless basis. You can create things in digital contracts, so they automatically will do this and that, and interest is paid and whatever it is. You don't need people to do it. The code will do it for you. And banking is seen as rather wasteful in that sense that a lot of people, a lot of human hours go into creating those things. So we have buildings that are lit up. We have computer systems that run banks. We have all the food that feed the people who work in the bank. Now, of course, people who work in the bank might not think it's a bad thing to be fed, but that's one of the ways to, I guess, measure the relative damage. Is crypto good the way it is right now? Well, more and more of it is getting closer to hydroelectric power and solar. So in that sense, it can be more neutral, but it does take quite a lot of energy. I guess by the same token, all the other stuff in banking could be more solar and more hydro as well.
So okay, that's kind of an interesting perspective I haven't heard before, looking at traditional banking versus the newer banking. It's interesting that you bring blockchain into it, because to me, blockchain is a technology that sort of delivers information safely, and I've always seen crypto as something separate to it. It could be delivered through the blockchain channel, but it's a separate thing, right? But
crypto has to be built on blockchain. It can't exist without a ledger. And I'm going to try my 2-minute summary of what crypto is versus banking, right? Wealth and money actually was invented when people invented the ledger. When writing basically was a way to record who owned what and who loaned what to whom and all that. And that was the very beginning of that. And what crypto is the digital version of that, which removes the need for trust, as in when it is written, it is in this immutable record, which everybody has, so that there is no doubt as to whether this is a true record or not. So in that simple sense, it's a record of everybody who's there, everybody's wealth in there. You can keep your identity secret within that, but it's a record of everybody's wealth and transactions that go left and right. And that's essentially what banking actually is. Banking is just a record of who has what assets and who has lent it out for what purpose. And literally what I'm talking about there, what banking does, is exactly doable using a contract in Ethereum, for instance, a smart contract that says, when this happened and that happens and the other person says yes, then these funds get put across and all that. And all that would happen without any kind of person having to be in the midst of that. And you wouldn't even have to trust this person, because the code is what would get it done.
Cool. Okay. All right, that's great.
If I'm an evil person,
most of it.
So if I'm
it's got a bad the black market is
but the reason why it's trustless that Joe was saying is that if I try and put on my ledger that I've actually got an extra few $1,000,000, everybody else's ledgers will go, nah, that's not true. And because it's decentralized. And so that's kind of one of the inbuilt protection mechanisms of having everybody with sort of the latest updated version of the ledger. Anyway, nice job, Joe.
Yeah,
nice job.
Yeah, I will continue. For some reason, I don't think I'm a dumb person, but sometimes there's some ideas that I've spent so much time trying to, like the blockchain thing. Getting pork from China to the US and having a blockchain along the entire cycle of the supply chain, so that you know what product turns up in your country. That makes sense to me. cryptocurrency always struggled with. But let's talk about some other things that have captured your attention in the news this week. Anything quirky, funny, unusual?
Well, what I heard about was the power of the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, after a long time, and I thought that was really incredible. People understand generally that you want to get the vaccine, but they don't know how powerful it gets. And what I got, and I'm trusting what I'm going to say now based on NPR's fact checks here, right? What they found is that long after the fact, when we were worried at first that the vaccines were sort of like diminishing in their ability and power, but what they found is actually after a longer period of time, your body does some very interesting tricks in terms of learning and coding, so that your ability to fight COVID actually goes up after some time, and in a bizarre way, in a sense that you can they say that you can they look at resistance to what is possibly the future variants of COVID as well, and they found that people who are vaccinated for this particular virus at this time, after some time, actually developed immunity to the original SARS virus from 2003. So
we can time travel.
It's amazing, because what happened with the SARS virus is that, or the SARS vaccine, is that it was completely dropped because we completely lost interest in doing it. It didn't seem to be as much of a problem. But so we've actually essentially right now not only got the vaccine for COVID-19, we actually have the vaccine for SARS 2003.
Hopefully MERS as well. There was a report that COVID hit the Asia Pacific region in 20,000 years ago, and that people whose ancestry is in this region have still got genetic evidence that of that hitting. It didn't go beyond the region, and it could be why the death rate in this region is a little bit lower than the rest. Not just being careful, but also the other side of it is more younger people or in the generations in Asia Pacific than in other countries, not Singapore, not Japan. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting part of the story. I read that of all the vaccines, the one that lasts the longest from an efficacy perspective has now been proven to be Moderna. So,
Dagnammit.
Yeah. Oh, look, I took whatever I could get.
Here you go.
Yeah.
Welcome to Vaccine Bingo, everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Sputnik on 6. Sputnik on 6.
Wayne's taken all of them.
Yeah, I was sitting down yesterday, and I said, "Oh, by the way, what is it, Pfizer?" And they're like, "No, Astra." I'm like, "Oh, damn. All right, it's better than nothing." So you got to take what you want. Wayne, anything jumped out at you this week in the news? Any especially quirky stuff?
Yeah, there's a lot of quirky news that catches my attention on the global front. In something that's really funny happening in China, and I guess this is the talk of the town among my arena, because we're all entertainers and actors, right? Is that China has ordered local reality TV shows to stop producing sissy boys and vulgar looking influencers. So basically, guys who try to make themselves look like girls, like wearing makeup and stuff like that. It's something that China is trying to lock down on. It's something really, really strange. So that's the strange news, and apparently the reason why this is happening is because they're concerned about the broader societal culture that's shaped by young Chinese people's consumption of celebrity news and entertainment shows, and its potential to run against the current values that's being promoted in China. So they even came up with a list of the best 24 shows that people should watch, and somehow these 24 best programs are kind of all linked to the China Party and Xi Jinping. So it's really, really odd. Yeah, it's really strange news, and I just want to add something as well. I think one of our viewers, Pravin Shekhar, was talking about how my hair. He likes my new hairstyle. I just want to tell Pravin, this what I'm trying to do is in line with what the Chinese Communist Party is trying to do. So today, I didn't wear any makeup. I didn't comb my hair. I didn't shave. I'm trying to look a little bit more manly, but I don't think it's working. But yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Would you be able to grow a Pravin moustache? Do you have the capacity?
No, not at all. Not at all. There's no way I can try. I think during the pandemic, I did try not to shave for a month, and I think I barely grew like an inch of like stubble. So just isn't gonna work. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we all should look more manly. and I think we should bring back the mullet. But yeah,
has it ever gone? So Wayne,
no.
I love the Chinese story. So one of the good things about it is the Chinese government does step in when there's these crazy sort of trends and habits forming. So 6 months ago, there was a fair bit of coverage. So in Northern Asia, so it happens in Thailand as well, but Korea, Japan, and China, there's this thing where girls are eating in silence and men watch them eating. And I've been in restaurants in Thailand where I've seen these girls do this, and it's just, I can't understand it. And I don't want to judge it. It's a different culture, different needs. The men are very lonely. They love it. They give these women lots of money. Everyone's happy. I don't think the women are disgracing themselves. They play music, they sing songs, all that sort of stuff, right? But of course, within the China communist sort of philosophy, the overconsumption by eating, basically that was spreading out into the society. So people were eating more than they used to do, and China's like, well, that's just against our moral values. So basically, sort of tried to stop it. And it's one of the great beauties of the Chinese government. They can stop stuff like that when it gets out of control. But I mean, there's some extraordinary stuff going on in China from an influencer perspective. It's just, it's hard to make sense of it, especially for me, someone like me, especially for the way what the women are doing, how they're behaving. But I try not to judge it. I try to observe it. I don't think the women lose power. I don't think it's an inferior position for them. I actually think they have a lot of power. But it is very, very, very strange. And it's hard. If you can pay attention to that side of the news, it's fascinating.
Yeah, China's basically kind of said, well, I mean, leeching. Wow, I'm embarrassed to always get the name wrong, but their leader, basically is not as comfortable balancing or playing a role between capitalism and the values of the party. So the balance has kind of swung back towards traditional values. That the approach seems to be right now that capitalism isn't the accepted, it's morally not, or from their own perspective, it's ethically not acceptable to just say, well, we have to be capitalistic about this and let the markets just do it. So they've stepped in to do a lot of things, and like the Evergrande debacle right now is mostly about that. It's a company that would never be allowed to fail in the US or the UK or maybe even here in Singapore, but China is looking like it will let it fail because it is against the values of their system, which basically is that homes are for living and not speculating. And Evergrande was way too much involved in that. It was over leveraged in terms of loans for that, and the whole thing about how prices of homes were getting too high. So they stepped in and basically killed that company, or at least it looks like it will die in the next few days.
So was that linked to the Alibaba story where they bought a piece and brought it back under government? Was that story? That was a while ago.
I'm not too sure about that, but I know with Alibaba, for instance, as well, they stepped in there. There was also the Ant group that was about to IPO, and they also stepped in there and stopped that from happening.
Yeah, thanks for that one.
they made tuition for profit, illegal, so that you only could do it as not for profit. And basically, I think the guy, a billionaire, I want to say, or at least a very successful man, his company went from being very successful to losing 90% of its value in shares, as their entire business model basically became illegal. But they're prepared to make those big steps, or take those big steps. And I think part of the reason why they can is that size of that market that they have. They're able to pivot and still go about their day. I think that's one of the big reasons they've been able to do that.
They sold me this wig. So I appreciate what they can manufacture.
Yeah, good.
What else have you seen that's kind of weird in the news? I spotted my brother sent me this one. It was a Tunguska-sized airburst destroyed Tal el Haman, a Middle Bronze Age city in the Jordan Valley near the Dead Sea. From Nature, scientific report from Nature magazine. Archaeological digs found that it's like a meteor came in and exploded above the land, which is what turned a lot of the sand and the buildings to and some of the pottery to melted it, and turned stuff to glass and increased the salt content of the area. And that was where the Sodom and Gomorrah wipeout happened. And this was just published a couple of days ago.
Nice.
So it's a really, really cool and a really interesting article from Nature magazine. The other one from Nature magazine that I noticed was published only a few minutes ago, actually, or a little while ago, where the study is that the northeast of the US is warming faster than the rest of the US. And this has been published in the journal Nature Climate Change. And the climate scientists in the University of Massachusetts who conducted the study described the warming in the Northeast as exceptional. The reason they say is that ocean temperatures are rising especially fast in the North Atlantic because the underlying causes a slowdown in the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, which is like a conveyor belt system that keeps
the movie after, what is it?
Day After Tomorrow.
Day After Tomorrow. It's based on that sort of concept. So they think that's almost on it's in crisis, but we don't want that stopping.
Yeah, and they were saying that the chances are America will heat up, but Europe will freeze.
Yeah,
if that happens. So that one they're saying, and the East Coast of America could become worse. So it's anyway. At least it's getting more attention. Hollywood tried. Yeah, that is one good thing about Hollywood, that they can actually be well ahead of the curve because they're looking for interesting stories and concepts to put out there. But at least we have references like you go, yeah, the one in Day After Tomorrow, and it's like, cool. Yeah. If that's happening, not so cool. Yeah. But
it's one of my favorite disaster movies because it's when I watched it, it's like, yeah, this feels possible. You know, all the other disaster movies, you know, the one there's one in South Africa where there's all these Martians come in and they live in this, you know, it's like, but Day After Tomorrow felt real. And
there's a new one where the moon crashes to Earth. But that's one that's coming. But that one, I mean, the thing I loved about that one is that America had refugees trying to get into Mexico.
Yeah.
And Mexico let them all in.
Yeah. And forgave world debt. Yeah. Which we can probably start looking at doing now. But so the other thing the big thing that happened in the news this week
is
obviously...
How much do you want to forgive me?
Yeah.
And after that, all the Americans looking for work at the Home Depot at Guadalajara.
Yeah.
Well, at least they've been learning Spanish. But I mean, it's not against America, of course. The whole world's got this coming, but it's a anyway. The study is that they're showing it. It's getting hotter.
It is, absolutely, no question. And there's a new iPhone on the market. And I just want to encourage everyone, if you don't need a new iPhone, please don't upgrade. Children suffer in mines getting the precious metals that go in your iPhone. It's an environment disaster. You're getting sucked in by aspirational marketing, which makes you feel that you need to have the latest version of the iPhone. And the reality is no one knows what iPhone you've got unless you tell them. So I've had my current iPhone for 4 years. It's on its last legs. The cover is sticky because I can't get a replacement cover because I don't do them anymore. But it's sort of, we've got to start looking at things like e-waste. It's growing, it's exponential, its growth, and it's not being put back into the future product. So if you can avoid, let's not see record sales for the new iPhone. And I'm sorry, Apple.
Can I have one if I give the Samsung away?
No, well, it depends on how long have you had your Samsung for?
It's been I think 3 to 4 years now.
Yeah.
Joe's had it so long, he's got a tattoo on his left butt cheek that says Sam, and on the other one it says Son.
So I'm gonna get one of the new phones because I have to, because just like the video and the photography.
Oh, I see. We're justifying it now.
No, but for our work that we do. So, but at the school where my boys go, there are all these scholars, and so I'm going to get new battery, get it cleaned up, get a nice cover, and I'm going to give it to the kids. So it will live on rather than going into
let me do a little crazy plug for the iPhone 13, even though you just said don't get one. If you're
don't
in
need
the business of trying to communicate really well, you can stop buying big cameras altogether now with the iPhone 13. That's one of the real benefits of this particular upgrade. And the thing about buying a camera, like for instance right now, the camera that I'm using and the one I loaned to Tim as well, right? That camera has become redundant with the iPhone 13.
What?
I mean, you don't need such high-end cameras anymore, at least at that part of the market, because the iPhone 13 is just doing all that. So one upside, and the only reason why I'm probably going to be getting it is that, and because I've had this thing for from a long time ago. So so
let's make sure that our waste goes where our waste goes next doesn't go into a landfill or an e-waste landfill, and that's the important thing, taking responsibility for that. But don't upgrade just because you want the latest, because that's
if you can, when you have an older phone, try and this is the terrible part, is to try and upgrade its battery so that it can give whoever it is you're going to give it to next, it can have a useful life. But don't let it be the last time you use it by putting it in the drawer.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a lot of those around.
My daughter uses an iPhone 5.
Yeah. My boys are on 8 and they're desperate for the latest, and I'm like, no, it's been 2 years.
Okay. My dad used an actual tablet made of stone, so hey.
Yeah. Nice. My dad doesn't even use one. Okay, so we thought we'd be shorter. We're not. So I don't know. Sometimes I think we should just give up even trying to be shorter. But this week's theme is taking.
No, we've done all right.
Yeah, no, all right. Well, sit back, listen, put it in the background, whatever you need to do. Taking care of your mindset at this point into the pandemic. Obviously, a lot of people are really, really, really struggling with what's going on. Just, it's never ending. There's a lot of suffering, and we all know we're in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. So the first world problems, sometimes people feel that they don't feel really justified in feeling the way they feel, or they feel guilty about it. But we're all going through various emotions. I go through weeks where I'm just not in a good place, because it's just relentless what's going on. So, Wayne, I know you have really struggled with it. Do you want to just sort of give us a view from, the millennial view? But we're a bit older than you, and we've probably been through more crises than you. Not like this, but how are you feeling? What's been going on?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I'm not sure whether I'm qualified to give the millennial view. I know I look that way, but
I'm a millennial.
What's that?
I'm a millennial. And so is my wife. Sorry, go on.
Okay. Anyway, but having said that, I think it's been really like nothing any of us have experienced before, right? Going through 18 months of unpredictability. It's been tough. It's been very tough. I think for people like myself, mainly who are in events and entertainment, it's been a very rough 18, now coming on to 20 months, right? It's like 1 minute you're always busy with an event, right? Our lifestyle is like, this week, what are the 2 or 3 events that we are running, right? And then suddenly from, 10 to 20 events a month, going down to 0 all of a sudden. And I think at first everybody thought, okay, this is just going to be like SARS, right? It's going to be just maybe 3-4 months. Okay, we can just go back and maintain our equipment, clear up all the backlog of admin that we had, and then after that things will start running again, somewhere in August or September or July. But it didn't happen. And then a year later, it didn't happen. And every time we look as if we're going to open up, it doesn't open up, and something else just throws a spanner into the works. And I would think that the mindset that we may need to have, I'm not sure how to have it. I'm not an expert in mindset or agility or any of this, but we are in a place whereby things are rather unpredictable, and we may just have to prepare for some kind of unpredictability. Even for myself, I wouldn't say I'm the strongest person around, but I do try to be positive and all of that. And doing that for 18 months straight, I found it actually pretty difficult to continue doing that for the past 1 month, because I've been holding on for like 18 months and just being positive and pivoting and doing virtual shows or whatever you have it. But after that, you just wonder, wait a minute, what's next? Because I used to know what's next. I always used to seem to have a plan, but now there is no plan for what's going to come next. Is it going to be something whereby we're going to be socially distanced forever? We're going to wear masks forever? We're going to be doing this forever? So it is really, I can't figure out what's next. So that's, I think, the state of mind that a lot of people are in. Like, what is really next for all of us? Do we ever really get to open up? Is the vaccine the end, or are we going to have more unpredictability?
Yeah. So Tim's just jumped off to go to the toilet. He asked me to spotlight you, but I don't know how to do that. So we'll just wait for him to come back. But
I think I'm the center somehow. My face.
I love that the idea of this was so that Tim could discreetly go to the toilet, and then we could mention it on the actual feed itself that he's on there.
Yeah, why not?
I think I was just inspired by the idea here, and I think you see, you're always wondering what's next. That's actually the answer. Next is next. That's basically it. You've got to take the next step when you're trying to cross a river and you are looking for the steps in the water. There is only the next step that you can choose from. And sometimes if you get to a place where you go like, okay, I got to turn back and try something else. That's sort of it as well. On one hand, it's a strong mindset to have what I call diamond hands and go like, I'm going to hang on to this. I can stay here. I can stay the course. I can keep going. But I think what we should be looking at in terms of how life works, to me anyway, is that it's like a river, or it's a kind of a body of water that we're traversing, and we're used to the way it was, but we're moving. We're always going to be moving and come to a new place. And in the new place, the currents might be different. The course is different. So those are the things that I think can help. Some of the people who've made it the best through it, especially from the entertainment business, for me, I've seen them as well, are the people who were able to just get down to doing something else first, and so and found, and I must say, found pride in what they were doing in the meantime. I think that the challenge is sometimes we can't see ourselves doing something else. And I'm guilty of that as well. I try as much as I can to keep doing what I'm doing, but we've also got to wrap ourselves around the idea that, what, maybe that thing isn't going to happen. It just isn't available for now, and we have to figure out something else. And we might be a bit embarrassed doing what we're doing. I have friends who've from the business who have, for instance, gone into streaming right now, and they're streaming for Lazada and Shopee, doing stuff which I imagined some time ago they might not have thought they were doing that or would do it, but they're doing pretty well, and I think they're doing pretty well at it as well. It looks like good streams. I just complimented someone on that as well for what they're doing right now. So it's a little bit of a challenge. I think in Singapore we are also very much driven to hanging on to the last high tide. I've got to here. Now I can only go here, when there has to be a little bit of the tide going out from time to time.
Yeah, the analogy I like for that one is that they're just different ladders. And when you get to one ladder and you're at the top of it, you need to jump to another ladder. In this scenario, you're going down before you can go back up again. But also there's an element of...
Before you dig in, Tim, I just wanted to talk about an idea that I call one of the laws of energy, the universal laws of energy, is what you resist persists. And I talk about it in my book, right, as a chapter. And COVID-19 is a global example of what you resist persists. And it is what it is, and we can't change that. We can all do our part to contribute in the communities that we're part of. But we've got to make sure that we're not resisting the truth of this moment. because the more you resist it, the worse it gets. And you don't want to resist it because you don't want it to get worse. So when you move into a state of acceptance, so this is what it is, this is how it's going to be, and then you then focus your energy on what you can do rather than what you can't do. Because when you're in the energy of what you can't do, you're stuck. So I always say, some time of creativity and innovation. Joe's example of the people doing live streaming for Lazard, a perfect example, right? Try and find a way to get out there and be part of the world, your world, in a way that makes sense to you. I've got a lot of people in my community who are musicians, and some of them had to go and work for call centers just to get the income to get themselves through this time. It doesn't mean they won't get back into music or performance afterwards, but they need to get through this time. So, but the most important thing is don't resist the truth of this time. If you resist it, it will be worse. Accept it, move into it, and the process will be a lot easier. All right, so Tim, you've got a little bit more.
Yeah, I've got another idea. I was, yeah. I mean, the other part of, because I was talking about ladders just before.
Sorry,
but the ladder still presumes where we want to go up, and so there is a point where there is an age that we get to in life that you tend to decide, no. This is, I mean, look, when people retire, they're at the age where they get to at life where they go, well, this is enough. That's effectively what retirement is. It's the this is enough moment. It's the moment where they go, that enough of doing that. I've accumulated enough, or if I haven't accumulated enough, what I have is enough, and I'm going to manage my enoughness. And so, in a sense, that doesn't have to happen at a pre-prescribed age. We can make that decision almost any time, which is the, I guess, the philosophy of contentment, because we are buying into this need more. So we've been conditioned to buy more, to need something else, to need at the next level of something, and we need to, and because we need more. I'm drowning in a comment here. There's a
no, ignore it. I wish I could see who posted them. I can't. So somebody said this one. I miss you too. I don't know who you are.
I can probably see the comment if I press the button that doesn't make noise happen. No, I can't. I don't know what's happening. Oh, here we are.
This is my favorite one.
Yeah, that was Praveen. Yeah, because I'm trying to out Praveen.
And that was before the mullet.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be able to out Praveen. He is the Praveen. Yeah. I'm not sure who said that because I can't see. I don't know what's happening. Anyway, so yeah, the idea of contentment, and now, so there's a challenge here. The challenge is, in the world of motivational speaking, typically the presentation is, go for the goal, set your goal. Your goal's way up here. Make it big, a big, fat, hairy goal, all this sort of stuff. Big, hairy, audacious goal. I think it was the one from like 2 decades ago that people still talk about. So it's like, have your goal, have it up here, have it this. You've got 2 actions to go for that goal. You can sacrifice, work hard, let things go, make decisions in your life that you're not going to do this, not going to do that, be singularly focused, go for the goal, make it all consuming, burn all the boats, all this sort of stuff. Or, you can drop your standards and not have to change so much because you're dropping your standards, and so it's framed in such a way that dropping your standards is an evil thing and that we should be going for this higher everything else. But the truth is, there's some of those goals I'm still holding on to, and I may need some advice from you because I still think I can play for Manchester United. But I may have to release that one at some point. Because I think they're getting better now. But except for never mind. But there is a contentment that we we have discontent. A lot of this feeling of anxiety that people are having, people like to have it, they'd like to be diagnosed with something, because then it's not my fault. And I get that that is real for a lot of people. And I get that a lot of trauma has come from external situations and the interpretation of that external situation. And I know that from the military side, that trauma is very, very real. And you're seeing stuff that no human should be exposed to, really. And of course, it's going to have psychological consequences. But there is depression happening and types of this happening in and anxiety, and very real anxiety. I'm not minimizing the anxiety, and I'm not intending to minimize anybody's personal experience and become a punching bag for that. I'm just saying that there's a couple of different ways that it's how we are framing our existence, and how we're framing our identity, and how we're framing our position, and what it means if I drop from that position. So, I mean, a lot of us are well aware that, when, especially in the traditional age, when a man would retire, he'd usually be dead within sort of 5 years because his purpose had gone. I've had experiences in my own life where I came out of a career and my whole identity was that career. Who are you? I do this. No, who are you? I do this. And it's like, well, that's not who you are. And so it's like
the loss of ego, right?
Well, a lot of it is, I mean, it's not, there's ego, but there is validation as well. There's this core need to be validated. I think that is a real symptom. A part of the foundational core problem of why we get this vitriolic venom coming out on social media. It's this need to be, part of it is the ego part of social media, but that vitriol, that need to be right instead of compassionate, is and that need to be right is because I feel I've been wronged, or I feel something is not working out for me. Life is not happening the way that I design it, which is still putting self above everything. And it's still saying my life should be like this, and it isn't, and it's that person's fault. And then getting really angry about blaming and justifying everything else, rather than that level of acceptance that Joe was talking about needing to move on, or needing to. And you, Andrea, when you were talking about some of those people were saying, I need to just adapt to what we need to do now, which is a very resilience and practical mindset. But I know other people who define themselves by this role that they had in a movie that gave them 30 years ago, and they've done nothing since, and they're still trying to relive that moment, or you know what I mean? It's like
what's his name in Along Came Polly? What's the actor who died a little while ago? He was a childhood actor. Anyway, go and watch Along Came Polly. It's worth it. I think the other thing that I've really learned in this time is, but being where I am in Thailand has been a real gift I can't feel sorry for myself, because there's so many people that are so much worse off than I am, and getting involved in raising money, feeding thousands of people every week, being involved in this community that has come together called One Phuket, to take care of our neighbours, to help everyone. So the idea is we leave no one behind, and we try and make it through this crisis together, because we're all in it together, but we're all impacted in different ways. And that's really, really helped me. And I think if anyone's feeling really down, go and have a look for a community in your community, the charity that's doing some good work, whether it's the Sikhs in Australia who are just cooking and putting vegetarian meals out into the community wherever they can, or donate. It's participate, don't just donate. And it helps to, you understand how lucky you are in the mix of what's going on around the world.
Yep, I agree. And that's where travel when we were able to travel could really make a big difference. because you would travel to places and just really get it. It's also why a parent saying to your kid, think of the starving kids in Ethiopia doesn't work, because they don't feel it. And it's why when your kids are exposed to that they can feel it, and it can make a real impact as well. But like you said, Andrea, you don't have to travel to see it, because it is in reality, it is in our own town. And there are people struggling, and we can make a difference. There was a piece I wanted to share, and I'll send Andrea. I'll send you the link if people are interested in it. It was I don't know what you think about him, but he's certainly out in the media. It's certainly coming in my feed a lot. Is Dr. Jordan Peterson, and he certainly has some quite polarizing views sometimes, but I think quite an intelligent perspective, and he's a psychologist, and I guess I respect the psych side of it as well. Anyway, so he asked the question, and this popped up in my feed earlier today, Andrea. You're just gonna be like, you'll get it. It says, are you depressed, or are you just at the bottom of a dominance hierarchy? And he said, because the symptomology is very similar, but the cause and cure are very different. So the symptoms can be the same, but the cause and cure are very, very different. So he's not minimizing the cause, and he's not, but he is trying to get you to be aware of thinking about what it is, and not just take, a doctor. You go and see a doctor, and you go, I'm feeling like this. He goes, well, you're clinically depressed. It's like, is it that? Or, I mean, yeah, you're experiencing those symptoms and that feeling, and that's very real. But there's a perspective element as well, when he talks about what a dominance hierarchy actually is.
Sounds interesting.
And part of it is and he does talk about levels of serotonin, and how some people can have that confidence level and that dominance level in particular that keep others down. And when you keep the others down, they're feeling this anxiety that these guys may not be feeling, because they're being dominated. They're feeling an element of powerlessness. And with something like a global pandemic, that powerlessness is we're feeling it, because governments have to make decisions and we're being locked down and all this sort of stuff, or business is just evaporating, or slowing to the point where significant changes need to happen. So we're seeing that people's mindset is being impacted. Mental health is happening as well. But some of these outcomes that we've been mentioning just now could be getting us to recognize that powerlessness, and it's a bit different to post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a bit different to clinical depression. It's a bit different to these other areas, which can be long onset and long tail, or quick onset but long tail. This one could be something that we're still resisting, like Joe was talking about. We're resisting the change.
Yeah, it's so important. So Jordan Peterson is a really interesting character for me, because there was his global backlash, because I don't think he's particularly appropriate in the way he communicates, and he gets people offside, mainly the feminists, right? And so then it reverberates around the world, and he becomes the enemy of women. But I've spoken to far too many men, some who've been really, really suffering, and he's helped them. So he's always someone I'm open to. So I think for anyone who's heard the message that he's not a friend of women, he's doing a lot of good work and a lot of meaningful work, and he's helping a lot of people. So stay open to him. Don't respond to the global backlash. Find out yourself. And then the other thing, like what you were saying, Tim, so I'll share that in my weekend reads if you get it over to me, because it sounds really fascinating, is spend the time understanding this. Spend the time, go and look up depression and what it means and what the symptoms are, lack of sleep. It's one of the first signs, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else. But let's move on to the final stage. But before we do it, Joe, I think you need to show us your T-shirt this week.
Oh, I see.
Show us your tees.
Here we go. This is my T-shirt. It's
Use
a
me.
brain. It says use me. Yeah.
Well,
And where can we get that on joe.com?
No.
maybe
This is not.
maybe
This
that
is
should have been our
Trevor's
brand.
Yeah,
a quick glance. Sometimes people look at it and they see a bikini with open fronts, but it's it's a brain. Yeah, that's it.
Yes,
yeah.
a very good message. All right, so the final quick session is what has been distracting you week? So watching, listening, reading, anything, something a bit of fun, something not too serious.
Actually, can I just have about 2 minutes, Andrea, before we do that? Sure, because you did just mention signs of depression. I did do a bit about that as well. Tiredness, it tends to be one of the number one ones, chronic fatigue or feeling burnt out. But that doesn't mean you're depressed. It could mean you're sleep deprived. But you could be sleep deprived because you're tossing and turning all night, because of some anxiety. Feel free to jump in, anyone, if you want to.
And there's also languishing as well, right? Became a word of this time. So the languishing is just can't get the energy up because it's just too hard.
Yeah, and the other one is this intense weight of meaninglessness, or what's the pointness, and then the lack of motivation that comes with that. And people are just like, just break through it, willpower, all this sort of stuff. It's just the battery is drained. It just feels like. But there's a few other signs. Wanting to be alone, avoiding socializing even with friends, can't focus, memory problems, loss of appetite, helpless, insomnia, mood swings, irritated easily, temperamental. That can happen, obviously, with lockdown and close quarters and just getting in each other's face. Particularly last year, we saw that happen a lot. Breaking down and crying, or just this feeling of overwhelm, shame, embarrassment, or guilt to even talk about it, or just of things in life. Self-blame, anger, trauma, overthinking, no motivation, and procrastinating. I mean, if it's procrastinating, then I've been depressed for 50 years. But I think it's
Me too.
And the overthinking side as well. But so that's really important, because everything I've said, a lot of us can go, oh my gosh, that's me. But that doesn't mean you're depressed. It's usually going to be a lot of these things happening at once. So,
one of the biggest challenges for me is when there's a list of stuff like that goes out and people identify with part of it, and then they analyze before they're that. And then it's self-actualizing, and that's the real scary thing. It's the WebMD effect, right? When you look at WebMD and you key in what you've got, and you go, oh, that's me, and then the rest of it happens. But that's the flip side of it. I just go like, okay, there's all those, and then there's the other thing that could be as well, right?
Yeah. So the depression tends to have a persistence, and I didn't mention suicidal thoughts or attempts in there, but that can also be in there as well. Sorry, Joe. I just wanted to get those last.
No, I was going to say I have to send my daughter off to tuition because I'm a kiasu Singaporean that way. But I wanted to, if I can give you my suggestion for a way to distract yourself. It's been offered up to me so many times on Netflix in the last few months. I've always not touched it. I finally did, and I absolutely love it. It's called The Fix, with Jimmy Carr and his cast of comedians. They tackle all kinds of problems in a fun way, and if you're depressed, those topics are depressing, but they make it fun. So go check those out for a bit.
Cool.
The Fix, nice.
All right, Wayne, while you're on mute, Joe, if you need to pop up, obviously just jump off.
Okay,
Joe. Based on what you said earlier, you should be sending your daughter to tuition in China. Okay, but see if you have to go.
Wayne, what's distracting you?
What's distracting me? Well, I would say that over the past 1.5 years, the thing that keeps me busy is probably my sports. I'm a huge basketball fan, so I spend a lot of time playing basketball, and I've moved to Woodlands. I live in Woodlands. I used to stay in Tampines. I used to know everything in Tampines.
We got close to his address.
Yeah.
What's that?
We just want to know where your mattress is.
The heist.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean,
by the way, how's your mom? What's her name again?
Yeah. What's your favorite house number?
Her name is Mrs. Augustin. Yeah.
Okay, gotta go. Bye.
Yeah. So
that
I
was
mean,
good.
I think sometimes I mean I'm just trying to match. I'm just trying to pull a thread through everything that was just said. Sometimes we just don't appreciate what we have, and also some of the little blessings. And I thought some of the little blessings that I felt that was really amazing was just making new friends in my neighborhood. I actually have like a WhatsApp group with people from my neighborhood, and these are people from the ages of 15 to 55. Still deciding that they want to come down to this basketball court in my area to play, and it's kind of cool to get messages from people like a 15-year-old boy sending me a message and messaging me, "Hey uncle, do you want to come down and play ball or not?" I'm like, what?
That's awesome.
It's nice like that. I like
it's kind of cool. I mean, like this.
Communities have changed during this time. It's people have remembered their communities again. Whereas before everyone was a stranger, and that's a really cool thing. What about you, Tim? What's your distraction this week?
I binged a little bit to finish off the first season of Loki. Did I talk about WandaVision last time? I watched WandaVision. That one got me like. I mean, I like sci-fi stuff, but the Loki one I think is really interesting. Actually, it's you gotta keep going, but it's kind of interesting as to multiple timelines. That's kind of what the idea is based on. It's based on time and timelines, which is really quite cool. And I watched WandaVision and I was entertained, and it got kind of interesting, and then it was like it was a bit irritating at the end, but it was all right.
That doesn't sound like something I want to get into then.
Yeah, I wouldn't. If I was
being irritated.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was. It was some nice twists and turns, and it kept me watching. But I thought Loki was better. I've because I went on the cruise. I did miss, so I was playing a bit of catch up this week, and and I haven't seen some of the episodes, so I'm glad that there's more episodes coming out on those ones. I've got to be more careful of picking a show that is still dribbling stuff out. I prefer to be able to binge when I get into it. So now I have to wait for Only Murders in the Building, but there is a new episode out, and I've worked out finally that they release them on Tuesdays. So.
Yeah, talk about that. Grace and Frankie launched their new season with only 4 episodes. I'm like, it's outrageous. How dare they? Decide
that's one night's viewing
is. Yeah, exactly, right? So one of the things I've been watching this week on Netflix, again, that sort of seems to be where we always go, is History 101. If you haven't had a chance to see it, I don't know how old it is, but it's really short, concise, and it's like the big stuff like nuclear energy, nuclear weapons, AIDS. From the beginning of the AIDS pandemic to where we are today, and all the issues that happened in between that I think a lot of us would have forgotten about. But it's really, really good. I think sometimes if you just want to have a quick catch up on the big topics that matter, go and check out History 101. It's just the first season's out. I'm sure another season will come out, but it's beautifully produced for today's sort of the way people seem to want to consume information. So, and important stuff. All right, so we're going to wrap it up. Wayne, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed yourself. We always go a little bit longer than what we think, but really appreciate having you here. If you don't know Wayne, he's a great guy. Go and check him out. Need an MC for your event, online events as well. He's great at what he does. If you want to be a guest on the No Show, we're looking for somebody every week. Reach out to any of us. We're happy to have a chat. I upload these directly onto my podcast afterwards, so if you prefer to listen to this as an audio, it'll be there within a couple of hours, depending on how long it takes for Apple to get it out. But there we go. And that's it. We'll see you next week for the No Show. You guys want to say bye?
Bye, everyone.
Wayne. Yeah, thanks, Wayne. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Andrea. Interesting topics this week, and we'll see. And Joe says thanks, presumably. We'll see you all next week on the No Show.
Yeah. Awesome.